Hey everyone, this is Dave. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. Today we're going to take a look at the latest news around ASTS SpaceMobile as well as the stock and where it looks like things will be going from here. To address a couple comments I know I'm going to receive right away from the Rocket Lab fans. Yes, this isn't Rocket Lab, but this is not solely a Rocket Lab channel. We cover investing in the space industry, and AST is now one of the largest publicly traded pure space companies in existence. So of course I'm going to cover it. If you're not really interested in that, that's totally okay, and I will see you guys back for the next Rocket Lab video very soon. To AST fans, no, I have not bought any shares yet. I am very happy to admit that the company is looking like it's in a lot better shape than it was just say 6 months ago when it was down in the twos. But I'm still trying to learn about this company, and in my experience, buying a company you don't understand extremely well yet after it's run up like a crazy amount like AST has in 6 months is usually a recipe for FOMO and disaster, so I definitely need to learn more about it. Part of the reason I'm making this video and continuing to research the company. But I do hope I can provide folks with some good information and unbiased commentary on the stock, even though I don't own it, at least not right now. So if you aren't yet subscribed, every new subscriber is very much appreciated, and I hope you'll consider doing that by the end of the video. If you are already a subscriber, those likes and comments always help out with the algorithm as well, and I'll be sure to read all your comments down below. All right, let's dive into AST SpaceMobile. Starting off with the stock price, yes, AST has had a little bit of a rougher run lately, but the performance over the past few months is still nothing short of remarkable and really nothing to complain about at all. If you got in even at the peak here near the SPAC date, you bought at maybe $20 per share and the price still at 25. So basically anyone who bought before, the last few months should be still up quite substantially, and anyone who bought down at the very lows should be, well, really quite happy with their returns. And more than the stock price, this actually addresses some of my worries about the stock that I did have back in the twos, because I was very worried they wouldn't be able to raise the required capital to build out their constellation, something that I still probably think is the biggest risk in the company, but more on that in a little bit and how they're going about mitigating that. But just the fact that the valuation is so much higher now means that they have that ability to raise additional capital if they need to through dilutive means. I know they're hoping to use mainly non-dilutive means in the future, but if they have to fall back on dilution, at least they can do that and raise significant amounts of capital, whereas back when the stock is down too, you really can't raise that money because the market cap is so low that you can't really dilute enough to raise the capital required. So ironically, this run-up itself is one of the big de-risking factors for the company. Talking a little bit about the current status of the company. So as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, they did just launch their first 5 commercial satellites on a Falcon 9 on September 12th at 4:52 a.m. Little bit of an awkward situation having SpaceX launch the AST satellites, especially with rhetoric really heating up in the media lately and the two companies sparring over FCC regulations and whether SpaceX is basically leaking too much interference with their planned direct-to-mobile offering. Meanwhile, you're turning over your own satellites to SpaceX to launch. Yeah, awkward situation, but the launch did go off without a hitch, and it was actually a really cool event because AST invited a lot of retail investors and community members down to see, and there were busloads of them who showed up and had a bit of a party watching the launch of the first 5 Bluebird satellites. Really amazing to see that retail community come together, and great timing with the stock price hitting such highs, everyone in great spirits and really happy, and looked like a great time. So if you did go there yourself, congrats, and I'm sure you had a great time. I'm a little jealous of that one. Each of these first 5 satellites will be nearly 700 feet wide when fully deployed, and we have heard from several interviews that things are going pretty well with the provisioning of these satellites and getting them ready to offer services to cell phones. So there was the AT&T head of networks went on an interview with the Manifest Space podcast hosted by Morgan Brennan, worth checking out if you haven't seen it already. A couple quotes that stuck out to me when he was talking about AST was that, well, first of all, he confirmed they had a successful connection to each of the 5 satellites and they were working just as they should, which is obviously a big relief because those are very expensive, not just to launch but to build, and it would be a huge effort wasted if they weren't working properly. He wasn't willing to give firm dates on when they'll start providing services to regular AT&T cell phone customers, but he did say that they're optimistic that in the coming 18 to 24 months, they'll see some pretty robust service coming online, so you can kind of add that to your calendar as 18 to 24 months, at least when this AT&T head of networks is seeing service coming online. CEO Abel Avellan, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, also did go on Manifest Space himself, this on September 16th. He had some interesting quotes as well. He said that we are building the next batch of satellites. We have 17 of them in process right now, and they plan to start launching them early next year, Q1 or Q2 2025. He also did confirm that they're communicating with all of them and that they're all nominal, and we're super happy with the results of the launch. So definitely a big relief and a big risk factor taken off the board with that successful launch of their first 5 satellites. He was asked when they'll be ready, and he did say that they're starting to deploy them. They need a few weeks to fully deploy. This was, keep in mind, back on September 16th, so they have had a couple weeks now, should be getting closer. He said that we will be lighting up around 5,600 cells across the United States to cover all of the United States. I believe that's just kind of segments of the United States on the map that they cut up into little cells. He said that with the first 5, it will be non-continuous service, so they can't, guarantee service all the time. It'll be just certain periods where the satellites are in the right position to offer service. And apparently the government is going to start using it right away, although they're very hush-hush on the details of what the government will be using it about and what the details of that agreement are, how much money that will be bringing in for AST. Those details we don't know yet, but at least it's nice to hear that they should be getting some revenue before, not having to wait that 18 to 24 months for it to come online with AT&T and other mobile network operators. He did say, though, that the government is using the satellites for a variety of communications and non-communication applications. So I'm very curious what the non-communication applications for these satellites might be. Let me know if you have any ideas about that down in the comments. I'd be interested to hear for sure. He also said that in order to offer full continuous service in the United States, they need about 45 to 65 satellites. Other applications potentially do not need the full constellation to start generating revenue, though. And when he was asked a little bit about their technology and spectrum, the quote that I found interesting, and this, think about SpaceX's Starlink when you hear this, he said, in order to offer broadband service directly from space to your phone, you literally need 2 things. One is that very, very important is to comply with regulations of how to share spectrum between satellite and terrestrial technologies. For that, you need to be able to be very, very precise where you point your signals and make sure that those signals do not interfere with anybody else, as these billions of people are using that spectrum with their cell phones currently. That is a requirement. For that, you need a very large array. That's the reason why they are large. So that gives you a little bit more of an idea, if you're newer to the company, why these satellites are just so massive. They're going to be the size of like half a basketball court each. And SpaceX's satellites are a lot smaller. We're going to look at some of the issues they're having with the FCC when it comes to getting approval to operate a little bit later on. Now, we did just have a warrant redemption date passed where 13,581,996 public warrants were exercised at a cash price of $11.50 per share. This is something that was announced quite a while ago, so not unexpected. This will add, if you do the math, about $156 million to AST's balance sheet. Should be helping out a little bit, although that price of $11.50 per share is, of course, much lower There was a slight amount of warrants, about 260,000 of them, that didn't get exercised, which basically turned them into worthlessness. So those owners, I guess, just missed exercising them or didn't realize they should have done that. And yeah, sorry to see that for those folks, but the vast majority of them did get exercised. Now, talking about progress on the technology front, we did hear from their CEO that the next 17 satellites are under production. The big technology differentiator on these next satellites that are going to make them apparently 10 times more efficient is the ASIC custom chip being made in partnership with Taiwan Semiconductor, a novel, custom, and low-power architecture that is developed to enable up to a 10-fold improvement in processing bandwidth on each satellite, unlocking opportunities for seamless space-based cellular broadband services worldwide. This has now been taped out, which basically means that it's been successfully finished the design phase and sent off for manufacturing. So hopefully those next 17 satellites will have much greater capacity using this ASIC chip with TSMC. So let's talk funding a little bit now. This is going to be one of the big focuses for the company over the next couple years as they build out that full constellation, because currently they have about $400 million in the bank, which is great and a lot more than they did have previously. But that's not enough to build a massive constellation of this size, servicing the entire United States and indeed the entire world. It's a good start, though. Now, they did announce a up to $400 million stock offering, although this is just allowing them to potentially offer and sell shares at the market price from time to time, and they have not yet actually put any of these shares up on the market. And they have said as well that their focus is going to be on non-dilutive financing, whereas this would be a dilutive financing. So they'll have that option available to them, over the next year or so whenever they feel like they want to sell shares if they need to, but haven't yet. And they at least are saying that this is not their primary plan or primarily how they hope to finance this massive constellation build out, which is likely to cost in the billions as opposed to hundreds of millions. So important to shareholders that they're able to gather that financing from other areas. So where are the other areas that they could potentially get this financing? Well, they're not making much money right now. As we saw, they're waiting for continuous service for AT&T coverage. Yes, they're going to start getting payments from the government. We don't really have any details on how much that will be. Probably, I would have to imagine, not enough to, finance the entire build out. But there's a few sources. So they are looking to receive cash from the U.S. government's 5G fund, which is designed to help deployment of 5G broadband access to the rural U.S., helping bring internet to those folks who are in more remote rural areas and don't have access to it. This is for safety reasons, as well as, just being able to bring internet to everyone. Now, this 5G fund does comprise $9 billion, so quite a lot of money. Some of that was originally earmarked for Starlink before it kind of got taken away, and, not too clear to me where it will be going yet. So hopefully for the company, at least some of that will be secured by AST, or, at least shareholders certainly hoping that. Now, they also do have strategic investors with many MNOs or mobile network operators like AT&T or Verizon, Rakuten, and many others across the world. And the hope is that they'll be able to raise more funds through these partners. They already have a $100 million deal with Verizon, as well as a $25 million revenue commitment from Vodafone and some others. Obviously, the market for cell phone coverage in the world is massive. AST SpaceMobile expecting demand to be about $67 billion in 8 years. On to regulation wars. The use of spectrum is massively important when it comes to these direct-to-cell technologies, or really any wireless technology, and being granted that use by the FCC. So the FCC did improve AST's deployment of these first 5 satellites. This is just an initial license for space-based operations in the United States, and with this initial license, AST is now authorized to launch and operate the first 5 commercial Bluebird satellites. This grants represents a critical step to advancing several important goals shared by AST and the Commission. So apparently they should be able to apply to expand this grant in the future. Do keep in mind, though, that they will have to go through that process, and the full-sized constellation has not been approved by the FCC as of yet. Still a much better position to be in than Starlink, at least when it comes to the regulation side of things. SpaceX recently wrote a letter to the FCC, as they've been having this back and forth trying to get their Starlink direct-to-cell technology approved. They sent an 11-page letter asserting that the cellular Starlink satellites won't be causing radio interference while operating above normal radio emissions. So long story short, basically the FCC has interference rates set of what is allowable and what is not, and there's really no debate at this point that the current Starlink satellites do cause more interference than is allowed under the FCC rules. So what SpaceX has been trying to do is trying to get the FCC to reduce their regulations around wireless interference by an order of magnitude. So say current levels where you cannot interfere beyond 100 whatever, it would now be 10 whatever. That in that level of measurement is decibels or something like that, I believe. So yeah, not really argued on either side that SpaceX is over the limit here. The argument is whether that limit should be lowered to allow them to operate. Kind of interesting that SpaceX went ahead and launched all these satellites with this functionality, knowing about this issue, but I guess that's really their, go fast and break things mentality, and really trying to push the FCC to make that change. SpaceX basically has been saying that reducing this limit of interference would not materially impact terrestrial phone users or worsen their service. And you can see the full letter to the FCC here if you're interested in checking out that entire thing. However, others seem to disagree. Now, AT&T and Verizon are, of course, investors in AST, so they're hardly unbiased on this matter, but they are basically alleging that the Starlink/T-Mobile plan would cause interference with existing mobile networks. Quoted here as saying, SpaceX provides no reasonable justification for why a service intended to supplement primary terrestrial services should be allowed to cause harmful interference in contravention of the Commission's rules and policies. By the way, the reason SpaceX having so many issues with this interference is the size of the antennas and the size of the satellites. That's why ASTS made them so large to make sure they don't have those interference requirements. SpaceX's Starlink has just many, many smaller satellites as opposed to fewer large ones on the side of AST. Now, SpaceX actually met with the FCC on August 8th, and they said in a filing that they expressed an expectation competitors would make misleading claims and draconian demands to delay the Commission and limit American consumers, saying that those operators' shape-shifting arguments and demands should be seen for what they are: last-minute attempts to block a more advanced supplemental coverage partnership and siphon sensitive information to aid their own competing efforts. The Commission must not allow competitive gamesmanship to stand in the way of life-saving service for American consumers. So, I mean, again, both sides obviously fully biased here, although the one side you would think would be in a better position because they're just saying the rules should not be changed, whereas SpaceX saying the rules should be changed. You would think there would be a higher bar to prove that the rules should be changed than just saying they should be kept as is. Going into specifics here, AT&T's technical analysts show that SpaceX's proposal would cause an average 18% reduction in network downlink throughput compared to SpaceX, which was saying there would be a negligible difference. SpaceX did perform its own study that seemed to prove the interference was a non-issue, so yeah, competing studies that will have to be going through by people more technically knowledgeable than myself just to decide who makes the better case. SpaceX is also surely not endearing themselves to regulators right now, arguing with the FAA about Falcon and Starship launches, as well as the FCC really butting heads with regulators, at least right now. The other thing is that radio astronomers are not very happy with Starlink as well, saying that the satellites are leaking 30 times more radio interference and are threatening their astronomical observations, because not all observations are in the optical wavelength that you can see with the naked human eye. Some of them are in radio frequencies or other frequencies. So this study was conducted using a LOFAR radio telescope on July 19th of 2024, and during these observations, the team detected unintended EM radiation from almost all the Starlink satellites observed, including both first and second generation satellites. So really, as SpaceX is moving incredibly fast with Starlink, the criticism is starting to come in on all sides about the interference issue. You do have to give it to SpaceX on the direct-to-dish service, though, is because I think that is really outstanding for home users to set up a little dish and have their home internet provided through Starlink. So those are our updates for AST SpaceMobile today. The stock's still doing really well despite the recent downturn. All sorts of spectrum fights with the FCC and SpaceX regarding whether Starlink V2 will be allowed to offer direct-to-cell communications. The first 5 Bluebird satellites are up and getting ready to start offering some government services, and they're starting work on their next 17 with that big ASIC chip upgrade that should 10x their performance. Still a long way to go for AST before they do realize that potential, because the market opportunity here is massive. I've never disagreed with that. I've just been a little bit worried about the amount of capital required to get to that end goal. Definitely progress being made. I'd love to see some more information on money coming in from those MNOs and or rural 5G America, but it does seem like the company's made a lot of progress, and congrats to investors on that. Can't wait to see some revenue starting to come in from the government side of things on these first 5 Bluebird satellites. Let me know how you're feeling about AST down below. Are you happy with their execution over the past year? Do you think they should dilute now and issue more shares? Do you think they'll be able to build out their full constellation and offer worldwide coverage? Do you think Starlink should be allowed to operate in the direct-to-mobile space or should be blocked? Let me know all those thoughts down below, or anything else you want to talk about, like are you buying shares today or waiting for a pullback or selling? Always love to hear those comments. Personally, I do continue to wait and see on this one, as the stock has had such a violent move over the past while. I'm not really prepared to make a move on it right now. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, I hope you'll consider doing that, and I hope you have a great day and a great rest of the week. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.